Good afternoon, everyone. So it will be me, Maria Velkova, working for DG Climate Action, and my colleague Roman Dubrava, who will explain to you in brief the application form part B. The application form we think is self-explanatory. There are a lot of instructions given in the gray parts of the boxes. You are, of course, invited to read very carefully the code text and all the annexes and the instructions. So here we are going to present really in brief just some key parts of it where we think you might struggle. Of course, you will have a lot of questions. We are receiving a lot of questions and answering a lot of questions, and we will be doing so until the end of the submission time. So I will start with the cover page, and that is quite a long page and quite easy to fill in, except for perhaps 3 of the rows, which are to do with the category, sector, and products of the project. So I will immediately, on the next slide, on this slide, show you an extract from Annex C, Appendix C1, where we explain a little bit more in detail what we propose as classification of projects for the Innovation Fund. So there is certain choices you can make, but then other choices are kind of given. So, for example, the categories are quite straightforward, and they come from the EU ETS directive text directly, and these are energy storage, renewable energy, energy-intensive industries, and CCS. There are some specificities here. For example, CCU projects will always fall under energy-intensive industries, whereas CCS, if it is split into CO2 capture and transport and storage part chain projects, the capture parts will have to be entered in the sectors of the energy-intensive industries, whereas if it is only transport and/or storage project, it has to be in the category of CCS and respectively the sector CO2 transport and storage. Then for the products, you have a little bit more choice because the sectors are given and you have to choose one sector depending on the principal product of your project. I will come back on the next slide on that point. For the products, there is a little bit more choice because in most cases it's quite straightforward and you can just select from this list, which is actually slightly longer in the annex than what you see on the slide here. But in some cases, for example, for substitute products, you will be free to define the substitute product, what you are producing, and of course indicate what carbon-intensive product from those produced otherwise in the EU ETS you will be substituting. So the choice of this sector is, as I mentioned, determined first of all by the principal product, and in most cases it's quite easy and straightforward. Like, for example, wind energy or cement production, there's no doubt. But sometimes it may be influenced by the use. So, for example, in the case you're producing low-carbon ethanol, it can actually fall into chemicals if this ethanol is going to be upgraded into chemicals, or it can be used directly as a fuel. Then you will have to choose refineries. There could be also more than one principal product, so several principal products, and if they fall in the same sector, like this can be the case for different chemicals, then again it is quite easy. You have to choose the sector of chemicals. But if they come or they are in different sectors, then you have a choice. Like, for example, if you're producing methanol from CO2 which is captured in a steel plant, then you can have the choice between the steel sector or refineries or even chemicals. And this, of course, is actually important if you read the code text. This is important for the calculation of the relative emission avoidance on one hand, because this is dependent on the principal product you choose to compare with on one hand, and on the other hand it determines your score in absolute emission avoidance. And I have a slide later on actually on that. But before we go to actually to the world criteria greenhouse gas emission avoidance, Roman Dubrava is going to present 2 slides on the on the project and applicant.
Thank you, Maria. Good afternoon. These are the 2 parts of the application form where you will provide summary information about the project and yourself. So what is the background of the project, rationale, and what is the specific objectives of the project, so that you are given a space to describe how the project will demonstrate that it is sufficiently mature, that it is innovative, and that it leads to significant greenhouse gas emissions. You will describe here how you would attract additional public or private financing, and how your project will contribute to the EU policies based on which also the Innovation Fund is grounded. Another part of this application form part will ask you to provide the summary of the technical characteristics of the scope and the scope of the project. So you will provide information about location, expected outcome, output, expected source and feedstock, technology and current status. What I would like to probably raise here, that even in the first stage, this is probably the most stable part of your application. You will need to be sufficiently robust and well defined in terms of the substance, of the nature, and of the key technical characteristics of your project, because this is essentially what you are going to compete with. This is your proposition. This is the technology based on which your project will be evaluated. How do I move? Okay. Okay. Then in the section related to the EU contribution, in the first stage, this is an indicative number that you will be asked to provide based on approximate calculation estimate of your relevant costs. Please bear in mind that we have produced quite a robust methodology for relevant cost calculation. They are provided in Annex B to the call text. And we have also prepared for applicants to guide them through this process a number of models. So for each of the methodologies to calculate relevant costs, we have prepared a model that will that is already uploaded on the website. So for each of the methodologies, you have a tool which guides you through the process, starting with an overview explaining what is it about, what is this particular methodology about, when is it applicable, and you will see again this famous decision tree that you have also in the methodology. Then you will have a specific tab which gives you example for particular methodology, which again guides your thinking, your decision making through that. Then you have an input part where you will essentially provide inputs and data about your project, and you have a part which calculates the relevant costs for you. So the model actually automatically calculates the relevant costs based on the inputs that you provide. And we believe that the guidance that these tools will provide may answer many questions that were also asked in Slido and that we have received. So far it is quite self-explanatory, but obviously we are happy to answer additional questions. So I pass now back to Maria.
Thank you. So here I will present the 4 boxes related to greenhouse gas emission avoidance potential. On that slide, the first 2, they may be not coming in this order in the application form, but I wanted to start with them because they are certain minimum requirements for some of the projects which will be submitted for funding in the Innovation Fund. So the first family of projects are those in the energy-intensive industry category, where they are EU ETS benchmarks. those projects will have to meet at least the EU ETS benchmarks when implemented. So this is one minimum requirement, and there is a space here to explain the calculation and to do the comparison. The other minimum requirement is to do with projects which use biomass as feedstock. So those projects will have to demonstrate through explaining their procurement strategy, for example, how they will meet at least the sustainability requirements of the Renewable Energy Directive on one hand, and how they will demonstrate that the feedstocks will have low risk of causing indirect land use change. So then there are the two key boxes for where applicants will have, in brief actually terms, to say what is the absolute greenhouse gas emission avoidance and the relative greenhouse gas emission avoidance. However, applicants will have actually to supplement the calculation with detailed calculation, in fact, in an Excel sheet. And maybe you have already seen then that on the Funding and Tenders portal, we have provided templates for some of the projects which we will be applying for the Innovation Fund. And I will show you how the templates look. They are structured always into 5 different tabs. So the templates are available for CCS, renewable electricity and heating, and energy storage. The reason we don't have a template for energy-intensive industries is that there is such a large variety of possible cases that for time being we couldn't deliver such a template. If one day we are able to come up with such a template, it will be quite complicated one, and it will not be exhaustive. So the templates are a possibility, a guidance. We recommend you using them because they are quite straightforward for those cases for which we have actually templates, and it will help you in any case present very clearly the calculation and also check it. So we have this first tab is the overview, where they are we have the definitions for the different entries in the formulas and an explanation of the tabs actually. Then, in fact, the last tab, but I'm starting with it here, is the conversion factors. So in each case, there are different conversion factors which come from the methodology. All this is given actually in the methodology, which is found in Annex C. And here, for the ease of applicants, the emission factors are already given. Then you have to actually define the reference emissions. And here there is usually there is a choice. So you're not going to obviously have all these rows, especially that, for example, what you see on the screen is the energy storage template, and there are many different possibilities, but you have to choose those which are relevant and determine, of course, the volumes in the reference case. And then similarly, you have project emissions, a separate tab where you can enter again, choose what is relevant for your project and enter the volumes for years 1 to 10. And then once the template is refreshed, the calculations are actually made into the green boxes, and they are actually automatically calculated. Hopefully it works in the summary tab, where you actually can check whether the absolute greenhouse gas emission avoidance and the relative greenhouse gas emission avoidance is calculated correctly. So we advise also projects in the energy intensive sectors to use, to the extent possible, this same structure, because this will help also the evaluation. Then there is a question of what happens if there are errors. You may have seen in the code text that we define 2 types of errors which may occur. One type of error is the clerical errors. These are defined as minor errors, normally caused by inadvertent negligence in the application of formulas or conversion of units. And most importantly, that these can be easily corrected. So the calculation can be corrected, and the score actually can be derived from this corrected calculation, the score for greenhouse gas emission avoidance. Other types of errors are much bigger. These are manifest errors. Hopefully we will not get such applications, but these basically are significant errors, and that cannot be corrected. They may derive from an oversight, omission, miscalculation, choosing the wrong methodology, anything. Please be warned that manifest errors will lead to 0 score and a rejection of the proposal. So, to show you here the scoring actually on this slide of the greenhouse gas emission avoidance, it is composed of the absolute greenhouse gas emission avoidance and relative emission of greenhouse gas emission avoidance. In both cases, the score can be between 0 and 5. For the absolute greenhouse gas emission avoidance, 5 points will be given to the project which has the highest absolute greenhouse gas emission avoidance in the sector. That's why it is so important to choose correctly the sector. And 0 will be given to the worst emission avoidance. Then the relative greenhouse gas emission avoidance is relatively easier to derive because it's linked to the percentage. So 100% of emission avoidance leads to score of 5. Then the two scores are summed, the maximum being 10, but then they are normalized to 5 because in each award criteria, in the first stage, the scores have to be between 0 and 5. If there are any doubts in the robustness of the calculation, evaluators actually may reduce points. And so that was on greenhouse gas emission avoidance. I have one slide on the degree of innovation. It is hopefully much more straightforward for applicants to explain their innovation. We encourage you to justify why we have to fund you, why your technology is innovative, what is the innovation in your project in relation to the state of the art. As mentioned already, we in the Innovation Fund aims to support breakthrough technologies, so there is actually a minimum threshold here, and any project which is considered to be only incrementally innovative will get a score of less than 3, so it will not pass to second stage in any case. Please read Annex D for examples of innovative actions. Also, the definition of incremental innovation is given there. These are, well, I won't dwell on that because Christian already explained it. And just here, a possibility actually to link your project with achieving the objectives of the set plan, one of the 10 actions of the set plan, and it is quite likely that projects which can help the implementation of the set plan are more than incrementally innovative. So I will pass now the floor to Roman, who is going to explain project maturity.
Thank you, Maria. So under project maturity criterion, we will look at 3 dimensions of your project on the technical, financial, and operational maturity. And probably to lighten up a bit, you just need to put yourself into the shoes of any banker, any investor, any financier. And just imagine you are trying to sell the project to them. So this is exactly what we would be looking at under the maturity criterion from those 3 points of view. So in the technical maturity, we will ask you to present your project in terms of its technology readiness before and after the project. In terms of the readiness of your project site, what is the expected output of your project, because this output determines the greenhouse gas emissions that you intend to achieve. How technically feasible achieving this output is, and what are your expectations in this respect. Has this technology been before tested in the previous stages or not? And how would you address any changes in circumstances, scale, or size compared to the previous stages if this technology has been tested before? We will ask you to present the key risks from the technology point of view and technical point of view, and provide a good strategy how to mitigate those risks. The application form is accompanied with a mandatory feasibility study. So we intentionally do not prescribe the table of contents of those documents. nor feasibility study, the business plan, or the project implementation plan. This is up to you, but those documents should address at least those points that are requested in the application form. And again, it is up to you. How do you structure your presentation? What will you put directly into the application form, and what will you keep in the mandatory documents? If you keep the bulk of the information in the mandatory documents, please always reference them precisely in your application form, because this will enable also the applicants to read through and correctly. Sorry, this is the wrong direction. Okay, financial maturity. Again, here we will look at how financially viable your project is from the perspective of the costs, revenues, profitability, and coverage of your costs. We will ask you for a robust and good business plan, again, as the mandatory document, where you will present your market, your products, your partners. We will ask you to present a good description of your costs and benefits, the breakdown of CAPEX, OPEX, present your cash flow projections and profitability. Also, what is important is to present a robust financial model based on which you base your calculations, so that the evaluators can assess your application correctly. The financing plan is also part of your application. So what will be the structure of your project in terms of debt, equity, own financing? What will be the coverage of your costs? How far are you in agreements with any funders or investors? What is your strategy to reach a full cost coverage? What is your strategy vis-à-vis your future funders? The more evidence you can provide, the better in this respect. Even though we are in the first stage application, obviously projects that would be more developed in this respect will have a more robust presentation and more credible proposition. So please take this into account in preparing your application. If you don't have kind of set in stone agreements with your potential funders or investors, you should already nevertheless provide a very good strategy how you are intending to achieve that stage, and at which stage are you at the moment. And also very important, if you are expecting any funding from the public resources, from the member states, for instance, you should be able to present again how are you going to achieve this, when, where are you in the stage, what are the steps that you intend to undertake in that respect. And again, please present the financial risks and how are you planning to address them and mitigate them in your project. And the operational maturity, again, the project implementation plan is a mandatory document. We will ask you to present a good granularity in the planning of the steps, of the milestones, of deliverables. This part of your application form should really provide a good understanding to evaluators on where you are, where are you heading to, what are your next steps, how are you going to achieve them, so that your promised delivery of greenhouse gas emissions avoidance and project output will be actually met once the project is operational. Please put quite some focus also on the project team. The people behind the project, they may change, but it is important that the key personnel behind your proposition is the right personnel that also increases the chances. So have a good thinking about this and provide the necessary background of the people that should be helping your project getting on the ground. The important part is the permitting and licensing. Please give this a good thought, be realistic in your planning, and provide a good strategy on how are you going to achieve the necessary steps, because they will determine your timing, your costs, And again, you should be able to present a good risk mitigation strategy and a good understanding of the risks that you will be facing in operational phase. Also related to operational maturity is how far are you and what is your strategy to reach a good contractual relationships, whether it is with your suppliers or off-takers. Again, they are the determining factors of your success in the business. So please be concise and as detailed as you can be in providing the information about them, about your supply or offtake contracts, and how are you going to achieve them so that your project takes off on the ground in time and in the volumes expected. And this should be reflected in your risk mitigation strategy, which is also part of the application form. The scoring, you have it already in the application, in the call text. So there are 3 sub-criteria with a total of 15 points after normalization down to 5. The minimum threshold that you need to pass is the 3 points per each sub-criterion, or 3 points after normalization. What happens after all 3 criteria are assessed? So those projects that will meet the minimum requirements under the 3 criteria that we have just presented, so greenhouse gas emissions, degree of innovation, and maturity, if you meet the minimum requirements, the projects that meet those criteria are ranked. They are ranked according to the sum of points received. In case we have projects with the same sum of points, they are ranked in the priority order, starting with degree of innovation, then the ranking in the specified sector according to the Annex C methodology, and at the 3rd priority we have a geographical scope. So we also would like to give some priority to projects from less from countries where there are less projects high ranked. Following this, there will be up to 70 best ranked proposals, or in case there will be still some budget outstanding, projects maximum up to 2.5 of the call volume that will be invited to the 2nd stage. If your project, however, does not meet the minimum requirements, it will be rejected. But of the projects that will be rejected, those that will meet the minimum requirements under the greenhouse gas emissions avoidance and degree of innovation, and will be awarded at least 50% under the maturity criterion, and the evaluators will deem the project sufficiently mature so that it can improve further with the project development assistance. These projects will be considered for the project development assistance provision. We will have up to 40 projects long listed, and after consultation with the European Investment Bank, there will be up to 20 project development assistance projects awarded and provided this assistance by the European Investment Bank. I think we can skip this. You have this already in the call text. Just beware of the page limits. I mean, they are very, very strict, these colleagues in INEA, so you need to be very, very prudent about your page limits. And what is the further guidance that we will provide? So this week already you will see the frequently asked questions that will come online. You already have on the portal the calculation tools for the relevant costs and the guidance for the greenhouse gas emission. And if you have any further questions, we are always happy to receive them through the Funding and Tenders portal.